Hi, I'm Jeff Gray and a longtime friend of Les Paul's, and this is what we think is a prototype Les Paul that I found in Les's house many, many years ago.
For me personally, seeing Les's Les Paul in our shop and seeing that it is a guitar that he loved and adored and played with and refined, those kind of things are incredibly humbling. So for us, the bar has just been raised again.
Les Paul, he was an incredible guitar player. He also was an inventor. He was an inveterate tinkerer. He couldn't just leave things alone.
I scheduled a phone call with Jeff, the second owner, only other owner beside Les Paul of this particular guitar. And we talked for about an hour and a half the very first time. Great stories about his relationship with Les Paul, his working with Les Paul, and how he acquired this through a trade. It was an opportunity of a lifetime for us to find such an iconic, rare guitar that was owned by, the master himself, Les Paul. It's one of the most iconic guitars of all time.
I had a Gibson J160E acoustic that I had purchased, and I put it in a paper called the Wanad Press, which covered parts of New York State and northern New Jersey and mid New Jersey. And I got home from work one day and there was a note on the dining room table that my bass player, who was living in the house with me, had written down. It said, "Old man called about your guitar, 201-327-79. And I said, oh, good. So I called back, and this older gentleman, who was probably 50 at the time, because I was 20, starts telling me about reluctance and all these things that Seymour Duncan and Les would only know about. And I just said, well, how do you know all this stuff? And he said, I'm Les Paul. And I said, I have so much I need to talk to you about. Is there any chance we'd ever be able to get a chance to talk? And he said, what are you doing right now? So I drive to Mahwah and knock on the door, and Les Paul comes to the door. His amp tech was there, a guy that worked at Mirror Sound in New York, named Ralph. And then Les's son came in, Russ, and I got a chance to meet him. And I have to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's like 2:30 or something. And I'm realizing that Les is on a different schedule than I am, so I had to bail. When I got to know Les for probably 3 or 4 months, I finally worked myself into the back rooms of the house. There was a basement, and to get to the basement, you go down a few steps, and there was a landing, and you'd go beyond the landing to go into the basement. And when I went down there the very first time, I saw a black case, and I knew enough to know that it was an old custom type case. So I said, Les, what's in that? And he said, oh, that's the prototype. And I said, oh, may I see that? And he goes, yeah. So I opened up the case, and here's this guitar with the broken headstock sitting in the case. He said, when I was a kid, I had an L4. If you can find an L4, then we can consider doing a trade. So we just did a trade, and then I didn't do anything with the guitar. I didn't know anybody that was a luthier enough to repair a headstock, and all the parts except the pickups were gone. I looked at the pickups, and I had no idea what low impedance handmade pickups look like.
Les liked low impedance pickups. He was after a pristine, clean, high fidelity sound. So much so that he recorded direct. He just plugged into the recording desk, not an amplifier. So these two pickups are wound by Les himself, and underneath them, or in front of each one, is a coil wound in the opposite direction to hum cancel. So, these are primitive humbucking pickups. Before the humbucker, there was Les Paul designing a humbucker.
The key thing here is that we've got evidence that this guitar originally came with a P90 in the bridge and an Alnico staple in the neck. From the original cavities, we can see the screw holes where those were mounted. Les really loved these Alnico staple pickups.
In order to accommodate the low impedance pickups, he added a humbucking coil. I asked him, why a humbucking coil when they're already low impedance? And he said, you have to have that. And I said, okay, because what do I know? And the coils that are underneath the pickguard are pretty big, and they're wound with a specific gauge wire and a certain number of turns. And that's the result of a lot of research that he did with his son Gene, where they would wind different coils and listen to them, record them, try a different gauge wire, different number of windings, put them back in the guitar, play the same part, listen to that, until they came up with what they thought was the ideal sound.
Everything about this particular guitar is custom. The main key thing is that it's one of only like 3 black flat tops that we know about. It's got a completely flat top, no carve to it whatsoever.
The body, the cavity inside the body, they all blacklight, sort of like contiguous with a guitar from the 50s. The fluorescence is perfect along these lines. This finish is all original. Now the neck, Les was known to, he wanted a neck that was perfect for him. So he was known to take a piece of sandpaper out and just work on a certain part of the neck. And then, so you got this bare wood, so you get the rattle can out, put some black paint on it. So from here on up, it fluoresces more like a newer guitar, because this paint's been on the back of the neck, it's been, resprayed.
I figured, well, it's a Les Paul, and I just got it. And I kept it for 50 years before I found somebody who was competent enough to help me do any of the minor repairs. The headstock had been repaired in about 1998 by Les Leva in New York City. He did a great job on that. But he passed away before he could really detail anything. So my luthier just touched up a couple of divots that were around where the crack was. And it really was not a sin, because Les had resprayed the whole back of the neck anyway. So we just made it look contiguous from one end to the other and didn't do anything else with it. We also changed this piece of binding, which I jokingly told Tom Doyle, Les's longtime confidant and luthier and sound guy, that it's probably still under the refrigerator in Les's house, because Tom broke the headstock on the guitar, which I didn't find out until probably sometime in the 80s. And I said, you broke the headstock? I didn't know that. He goes, yeah, the strap button came out and the thing went down on the floor and bang, and I thought Les would never talk to me again. And he just put it back in the case. He said, oh, well, I got plenty of these, and that was the end of that. And they'd been lifelong friends for another 40 years after that, so.
And it spent a lot of time in a case, in its case, broken, and eventually was repaired. So you've got evidence for repair back here, evidence of respraying on the neck. The rest of the guitar body, the evidence is, all this is Gibson work from the 50s.
We see evidence even where this has been repaired and reshaped by Les, where from the factory we see factory finish where there would have never been binding on it. So it was ordered without binding. We see photographs of him playing it, no binding. Another feature that went into the Black Beauties was a little bit elongated headstock. These are probably about a ½ inch longer than the typical Les Paul standard. He liked to have a little bigger headstock for more sustain. Same thing with the no binding on the fretboard. If he was doing pull-offs, he liked to feel wood completely without feeling the edge of the binding. He liked to have all of the fret into the wood of the neck, not having any of the fret being dampened by the plastic of the binding.
This kind of feels more like a 59 or something, not a 58 big chunky neck. But the reason for no binding, according to Les, when we talked about that, was primarily that the sustain of a guitar is based on the density or the weight of the wood in the neck. That's where sustain comes from. Sustain comes from the neck, quote, Les, unquote. And when you think of all the wood filings that are on the ground, when you go to route that out for binding, that's just lost sustain. I know it's minuscule, but he knows stuff. So he just didn't want to do that. And the other thing is he would do pull-offs a lot. It probably was a combination of two things. Like, you know, why do we need binding? I just don't want to have that on any of the guitars. So this guitar apparently never had any binding, albeit the nut width is different than the standard 1 11/16 that was popular for all the guitars through that Gibson period, I would think.
Another unique feature is this wooden bridge. This was something he hand carved himself. The genius of Les, even back in the 50s, he's got a serpentine shape to this to better intonate the guitar. It looks rough, but it works. The next thing, part of the bridge, Les was known to want to install much larger screws than what was traditionally used as ABR screws. So these are 1/4 inch steel screws that go into the top. He felt like that would transfer more energy into the top of the guitar to get better sustain. That's what Les was all about.
There's a book called Les Paul in His Own Words, and there's a great picture of him playing this guitar with Mary Ford. I think the picture's from 1960, and you can see the bridge. This bridge is handmade by Les himself.
We have several photos. Most of them date starting in 1958 onwards into the 60s of him playing this guitar. We've done some AI photo imaging and other things to enhance things. We can actually see the unique wooden bridge.
And don't forget that this was plugged into the Les Paul Pulverizer, so it's still all low impedance microphone tippering and sleeve things coming out of it, like the microphone input here with the volume control for the microphone, because who in their right mind would carry around a mic stand and a mic clip and a microphone and a cable when you could have a gooseneck that's 8 inches long that would fit in the pocket of the guitar, and all you would do is plug it in and you're done. So again, that logic set, it's overwhelming.
What's unique about this one is there's no side jack. Never had one. He only had this top jack, and this would go straight to the pulverizer, which was a box that he invented to attach to a Bigsby tailpiece. And from there he could step up, and he had this long snake that went backstage to all sorts of his multi-tape machines and other things to control mic volumes and everything on stage. So this guitar was designed purposely for Les to perform and be his favorite style guitar.
There's quotes from Les saying the flat tops were his favorite. And there was 2 black ones, 2 white ones, and Mary would play the white guitars and Les played the black guitars when they were a duo.
One of the fun tricks was if someone in the audience at Iridium got up to use the bathroom, Les would just stop the band, and the person would turn around like, what? And Les would look at him, you don't want to miss this song, dude. This is so good. We're just going to wait. So he would do this a lot, you know, that was kind of a podium move. And this poor person is in the bathroom trying to get out of there as quickly as possible. And they'd walk out and the audience would applaud and the poor person would sit down in the seat and Les would go, okay, let's pick it up where we left off. And they would just nail it again.
Like 99% of the rest of the guitar world, no, I've never seen a flat top Les Paul custom. I've heard of them, but yeah, this is the first time I've seen one.
The word iconic gets thrown around, certainly in our industry. It gets thrown around a lot, you know, whether it is an instrument that's iconic or the player behind them is iconic. But when you see something like this that was built by somebody, designed by somebody rather, that went on to define music as we know it, I think that's truly iconic.